Hello, BookTube. Right, we're continuing on with my 12.6K Q&A. I was worried briefly that, like the last time, I wouldn't get around to this until we'd already gone to 12.7 Q&A, but it looks like some of you have come to your senses because we're still a ways off from 12.7. Good. So we are at actively read. That is the next question that we're doing. Love your channel, Steve. Well, thank you. Isn't that nice? 2 questions. What percentage would you say of your reading comes from ebooks versus physical books? And what are your thoughts on this new hyped-up font style to hit the digital reading world called bionic reading? It supposedly helps people read faster. Was skeptical, but I've tried it and was actually amazed. Hoping Amazon and Kobo both update their e-reader software soon to add this font style. Well, in answer to your first question, ebooks swamp printed books enormously in my reading. 70-30, at least 70-30, might be more than that. And when it comes to bionic reading, you say that you were skeptical and you tried it and were amazed. You're probably going to have to come over here for wine and calzones and a good stern talking to, because it's a gimmick. You have to know that it's a gimmick. There is no substitute for doing the work. How many times do I have to say that in every aspect of life, not just reading or writing? That's where I usually say it. There is no substitute for doing the work. There is no shortcut. There's no gimmick that will do it. Well, I'd be interested in hearing your story. I'd be interested in hearing your story with bionic reading. I don't think, it seems to me that it rips the guts out of any kind of substantive reading experience, and that it's designed to do that. Maybe, but if you had a positive experience, maybe there's more to it that I'm not seeing. Scott Tippin says, would you consider ghostwriting the last 2 Song of Ice and Fire books for Mr. Martin's fan? No, sorry. Sorry, no. Number one, he already has someone who's poised perfectly to do that. He just hasn't given permission. It's completely stopped doing anything himself or letting anyone else do anything themselves. But also, I would have to steep myself in the books to do that, and I'm not going to do that. They're just not good enough. They get pretty boring, and they have long stretches that are pretty bad. I would never take the job, not to mention the fact that if I were involved in ghostwriting, it's entirely possible that the second half of 2022 is completely booked. Matt Sheridan says, hey Steve, congrats on 12.6K subscribers, and soon we will be at 13K, that we will never reach 13K. One comment and a question. The comment, Jaws is better than Jurassic Park. The books, do you mean? Or the movies? The books, Jaws is a better novel than Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park, in someone else's hands, could have been a very good book. Really could have been. But it isn't. And so it isn't. But the movies? I know the film bros like to go nuts. They love to just, oh my God, fill their boxer shorts with, all the film school jargon that they learned in between vape hits about framing angles and sequence of action and all that for Spielberg's Jaws. But come on. Jurassic Park has a car chase that goes down the side of a tree. It has T-Rexes in it. It's a much better movie. And then the question. What are your thoughts on Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon? I believe it's an underrated masterpiece. You are not alone in believing that. I have met a number of people who believe that. And you're all wrong. It's dumb. The subscriber count's going down with every question. I want to know why you love it, is my question. I don't criticize at all the fact that you do love it, but I want to know why you love it. This is an author I have read painstakingly from the beginning of his career. I think I'm in a pretty good position to know when he does the equivalent of a tossed-off exercise, which is what Inherent Vice struck me as being. So I want to know why you think it's a masterpiece. You're not even just saying that you think it's good. You're saying it's great. I'd want to know the reason. No reason that anyone has ever given me holds up. And usually the reasons that readers give me for why they call it a masterpiece is that they really don't want to do the work of reading Gravity's Rainbow or Mason and Dixon. And if that's the case, we should be straight about that, right? Anyway, Shelf Life has an absolute barrage of questions. Dear Stephen Frieda, I started watching your videos as a 25-year-old, looking up to you as I would an older brother. Aw, not much older. This is no longer the case. Today I turned 29. I am in the midst of a serious crisis. I don't care about aging per se, but to suddenly find myself older than Steve Donoghue, what shelf life is referring to here is that I am well known to be 28 years old. Hopefully you'll humor my barrage of questions due to these painful circumstances. I will, and I also want to console you that all of my friends have had this moment. At one point or another, well actually at only one point, they've had this moment where they suddenly realize they're older than I am. Number one, what are some places in Ukraine that you have particularly fond memories of visiting, perhaps places that are sadly no longer there? Well, there aren't any places that aren't there anymore. Right? We're not talking about the Tholian web. We might be talking about ruins or damage. But Russian forces can't even use GPS, so they can't wipe a physical feature out of geography. But when it comes to fond memories, most of my fond memories of Ukraine are of the seashore, and I know it's going to be very trite, but I loved Odessa. I came an inch away from living there for a bit. Zakota the same way, but mostly Odessa. I loved the feel of the place, just loved it. Loved the people that I met. I know that's very trite, but I'll go with that. Question number 2: do you have pictures from your travels that would share with us, or any other pictures from your youth, say when you were 26? Well, if you scour backwards on my sexy Instagram account, you will find a handful of photos of me from when I was 26, from when I wasn't 28, including, if I remember correctly, a couple of pictures. Pictures of me while traveling are extremely rare. I never traveled with anyone. I never had a camera of my own that I brought with me. It was never anything that I was doing it for. I wasn't traveling for that reason. I was not generating keepsakes. And, you know, this business, this passé line from the travel industry about generating memories, I had my own memories. Thanks. I have a brain that can make memories. That I wasn't doing any of that. So pictures like that are extremely rare. But they do exist. I'm sure there are more of them than I know, more of them than I have access to. There are plenty of pictures of yours truly on Instagram when I was a younger super hottie. Still a super hottie, but I was younger. Let's see here. Question number 3. Did you have to deal with any sick corporate chain store practices when you worked at Barnes & Noble? For instance, being told to recommend books only by certain publishers because the store has some sort of contract with them. Did you argue with the manager? I got out of Barnes & Noble just before they started the absolutely satanic practice of telling employees which books to recommend. Whether they've read them or not, whether they like them or not. Instructing employees to lie to the customers. I, of course, would have refused to do that. And not only that, but I would have made sure to counteract it every time I heard it done in my presence. It wouldn't just be that I wouldn't repeat the corporate line. I would also have said, sorry, hold on a second, to my customer. My colleague just recommended this book to you. She's lying. She hasn't read it. She's been told by the company to recommend it. Don't take her recommendation. If you'll wait a minute, I'll get you a book that you'll like. I would have done that, and as you know, I would have been fired immediately for that. The company just got worse. But it hadn't yet got that bad when I was there. But they did, over the years, try things like that. Like, for instance, a long, long time ago, in the mid-90s, I think, Barnes & Noble briefly had a partnership with, was it I Write or I Publish or something like that. It was a sort of a self-publishing venue. And we had, the corporate name tag. You had your name tag on and a lanyard around your neck. And they insisted that the name tag say, I recommend such and such. So my name was on one side of the tag, and I was a billboard on the other side of the tag. And I went 10 rounds with my manager and her boss, her district manager, over that, saying, I'm not going to do this. You can't rent out my body to advertise things. You are requiring me to wear this piece of identification. You cannot ask that piece of identification to express an opinion of mine that I don't hold. And them saying, well, sorry, but you generate a lot of sales for this store, but it's corporate policy. And it got to the point. It was one of the only times it ever happened. It got to the point where I said to the district manager, I get the feeling that you are leading up to saying, do this or we'll fire you. And this is not the same as some sort of break room policy about microwaving halibut. this is it's actually against the law. You are infringing on my First Amendment rights. I could easily get a pro bono lawyer to make Barnes & Noble headlines all over the country by making this known. So I am asking you to drop it. Because I'm not going to quit, and I'm not going to let you fire me over breaking the law. God, that seems so antiquated now. Barnes & Noble now, I'm sure, asks far worse things than that of its employees, and just expects that they'll do it. But in answer to your question, there wasn't much. After a while, I was sort of a special case, and so requests like that, demands like that, weren't made of me. Let's see here. Number 4. What is the female equivalent of a dude bro? Cigarette smoke makes me throw up, and I don't care for craft beers. But then again, I do love John Williams. Thoughts? Also, is it only Stoner you dislike? What about Butcher's Crossing or Augustus? Let him go. Let him go. The little dude bro cult around John Williams is entirely based on their fear of acknowledging how much of the Western canon they have not read. They don't want to do it. They'd rather insinuate that they have and that they're writing it all off because this is the real stuff, man. Yeah, this is the real stuff. That is actually the assumption behind a whole bunch of the dude bro subculture, and it is an explicit lie. It is an explicit lie. These people have not read the canon. They're just acting like, yeah, there's the canon, but everybody likes that stuff. Everybody knows that stuff. Do you? Do you really? So you've read the climactic scenes of Sense and Sensibility, and you know why they're good. You're going to tell me that? You know Anna Karenina backwards and forwards. You've read it more than once. You're familiar with what it's doing. Maybe in more than one English language translation. No. They aren't ever familiar with that. This is just a dodge. That's all. It's the equivalent of a hipster insisting on original press vinyl. Insisting on the first ashcan release of some band that's now a mega hit. Oh, well, yeah, I like the very first thing they did. They didn't actually record it. That's when they were good. Everything's downhill since then. You don't want to be those people. Let him go. Okay? Just let John Williams go. When you think John Williams, pick up Anthony Trollope. I swear, the subscriber count is going to be going down with every installment here. Question number 5. Have your personal relationships ever suffered or been severed due to your strong opinions? No. I've had personal relationships severed, but never because of that. No, I don't care about these things enough. I care about them plenty, but they're not personal stuff, friendship stuff, love is an orders of magnitude more important. And those relationships can sever, yeah. But it's for personal stuff. It's never because I have a strong opinion of what should or shouldn't be done in, Israel or on books on the subject of no, oh good God, friends of mine, never in a million years would we end a friendship because we disagree about a book. Those are the best things. It's the best thing in the world to be able to just bare knuckle wail away in complete disagreement with a friend. That is the best feeling of the world. And I feel sorry for 21st century denizens who do not know that is possible. They just don't. It's not part of the 21st century anymore. I realize that. So they have no idea what it's like to just completely disagree with someone where the disagreement is as fierce gets, and the friendship is never endangered at all. So many people in the 21st century, denizens of social media, have no idea that that's even possible. I feel sorry for them. They're missing out on something. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun when you have a friend and the two of you are hunting around for a subject that you can fight. Because fighting's lots of fun. It's not just South Boston Irish Catholic people who think that. Please keep providing your home decor critique. That's some of your best material. Yeah, I get a lot of emails about people saying, "Oh my God, that was the laugh I needed today." You going through, Architectural Digest or whatever. I had no idea. Omnipotent Poobah says, "Hi Steve, well done on the milestone. It's not every 28-year-old influencer who manages to amass such a following, so congratulations." Actually, most of them have 10 times this many subscribers. Most of them would consider it nothing short of pathetic on my part to be celebrating, what is it again? 12.6K? So most of the 28-year-old influencers are doing a lot better than I am. Just one question. There was an article I read recently by Ash Sarkar, a UK rent-a-quote political commentator, bemoaning the lack of men who read novels. Apparently 20% of novels in the UK are now bought by men, and the number is declining. What do you think is the driver for this? First of all, you may be omnipotent, Poobah, but you clearly are not omniscient if you're taking swipes at my beloved Ash Sarkar. Rent-a-quote? Say what you want about all those smart kids at Novara Media, and Lord knows I have plenty of things to say about them. Their simping for Russia during this invasion of Ukraine has been nothing short of stomach-churning. But say what you want about all of them, they believe what they're saying. All of them do. There's no rent-a-quote involved. And she's the best, by far. So you have offended me, sir. But as to the thing that she said, and that is now viral on Twitter, this whole thing about men not reading novels, I have two reactions to it. I've actually been thinking about writing a column about it, but I don't think the good folks of Iowa would care. First, actually, I have three things. First of all, never trust surveys. This number could easily be wrong, completely. Not just that it's 24% instead of 20%, but that it's 84% and no one knows what they're doing, or no one parses the numbers right, or you haven't read the actual survey, which a lot of times will find that's true, that news articles, and especially people on social media, will be regurgitating the headline of a survey without reading the survey. Was this a survey of 100 people? And what were the questions? How were the questions phrased? If you don't dig into stuff like that, you absolutely can't trust a survey, especially one that pops out a nice handy-dandy headline-ready percentage. So that's one reaction. Second reaction, we asked, what do I think is the driver for it? Video games are the driver for it. Despite some fraudulent industry studies that I have seen, I would estimate that fully 80% of the people who play video games are men. And those video games have completely replaced the act of reading. They've also completely replaced the act of doing anything else. These men are vanished. They're gone. They're not present anymore. They're not at the local pub. They're not at the dance club making fools of themselves. They're not doing it. They're at home 10 hours a day playing video games. That's what's done it. If it's been done, that's what's done it. And my third reaction when I saw this, my very first reaction was, well, who needs them? And women are better readers than men. More passionate, more attentive, more discerning. So, and don't get me wrong. I'm not sure that this study is right, and if it's right, I'm not sure what it means. Especially if the study is hinting. I haven't looked at the actual data myself yet, but every report that I've read says that the study not only says the percentages are really bad, it also says they're trending downward, which is a whole other kind of study. I would want to see the questions, and especially the size of the sample. But, I mean, if the study is correct and all of the data is right and pans out, are you asking me, am I absolutely broken up that maybe there's a few thousand fewer Joe Abercrombie readers in the world? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not all that broken up. I don't know. I'll assess it. Maybe it's worth a column or a video. Let's see here. Ryan Mahokey says, in your Western Canon series, you discussed it being necessary for one to be knowledgeable on past works due to the shadow they cast in current works. Okay, not necessary. It's not necessary. There is at no point in the Western Canon starter kit did I raise the specter that you were some kind of imposter or fraud if you don't do this. You can read happily and valuably your whole life without reading a single work from the Western Canon. Any element of obligation about those works should be gone. The point that I was making, the should point that I was making in the Western Canon Starter Kit, is that literature is linear. You learn to read before you learn to write, which means that all literature is affected by the literature that came before it. Which means if you want to know that, if you want to be well-read, legitimately so, you're perfectly free to read Haruki Murakami and love him, or have a love-hate relationship. Most people that read him have a love-hate relationship. You're perfectly free to have him be an important writer in your life without ever having read Mishima, Soseki, Tanizaki, anybody. You don't have to know anything about his tradition to read his books and like them. But You do if there's that extra element of being well read, as opposed to being energetically or enthusiastically read. So I want to push back about that just a little. I was not A.E. Housman in The Paper Chase. I was not this bloated professor in those videos saying you need to do this to be a legitimate reader. That there's no element of that in those videos. I contest you to find it. So I wasn't saying that it was necessary, but I think I get your point. But anyway, therefore I'm curious as to if there are any late 20th century, 21st century authors / works that you believe will be part of that integral canon in 100 years. Well, there's no way for me to know, because it's a question of literary influence, right? Which takes time. It takes time, imitation, fads, schools of thought, that sort of thing. So there's no way for me to know, or anybody to know ahead of time. But it will certainly happen. Unless reading dies completely, it will certainly happen. Also, what is your favorite Kurt Vonnegut book? He stinks. All of his books stink. And he personally stank. You want an idea of hell on earth? Be trapped in an elevator going up 5 stories that isn't air-conditioned with Kurt Vonnegut. Never wrote a single word that was any good. Never. Wait, one more. What do you think of Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons? Oh, Ryan, you're not doing very well. You're not doing very well at all here. Kurt Vonnegut wrote Juvenilia. Once you are no longer 13, you have no excuse to read his works, much less have words from them tattooed on your body. And Gertrude Stein, I don't see it. I don't see it. And the thing that makes it even more resonant that I don't see it is how many of her chronological direct contemporaries I do see it. So it's not just her mood or her movement or her time. It's her. It's her. It's that leaden, damp, wet wash prose style of hers. Just... I didn't like Tender Buttons. Let's just move on. William Fett says, "Hi, Steve. I finished reading 7 Days in May and really enjoyed it. What do you think of the movie? What are your thoughts on the book Failsafe?" Well, I'm going to tell you all about my thoughts on the movie, 7 Days in May, in the final installment of the read-along that I'm doing of it with Matthew at Maybury Book Club. That'll be a separate video that I'm hoping that I make today. But Failsafe is... it's also a very, very interesting book. Fascinating. There's a sort of a pod of 20th century political novels that have largely fallen out of the public consciousness that are all worth reading. 7 Days in May, Failsafe, Corridors of Power, what's the other one I'm thinking? Advise and Consent. These things that had a massive readership for a season or 2 or 10, and are now gone completely, that are worth reading. Failsafe has a huge weakness. I don't know. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it or who hasn't seen the very effective movie with Peter Fonda. But it has a huge weakness that the other books like that don't have, especially 7 Days in May. 7 Days in May, those of you who haven't been following the read-along, is about a prospective military coup to take over the United States government, which was decried by officials at the Pentagon when the book came out in the 1960s as rabble-rousing, perhaps communist-tinted, anti-American propaganda. But we have all now lived through an attempted coup on the United States government. It wasn't done by the military. But we now live in a world that is radically different from the world where that book appeared. But I don't want to spoil it, but the big conclusion to Failsafe absolutely would not happen. Never in a million years. No question with that of saying, well, just wait and see, or it could happen. It would never, ever happen. It's fantasy. And not just America. No country would ever make the decision that's made at the end of that book. So it feels a little bit different than Advise and Consent or anything like that. But still, I liked it. It might be worth a read-along. Jim's books, reading, and stuff. Has the TV series superseded the novel as the primary narrative medium? You're trying to get me in trouble. Is that what you're trying to do? People don't read anymore. And yet people are absolutely hooked on binged long-form TV, where the thing has been made to be binged. So some thought has been constructed on an overarching plot. It's not episodic in the way that old Star Trek was, or something like that. That is very, very close. That's a cousin once removed to the mind frame of a novel, of building a novel. Replaced, though, I'm a little bit hesitant to say that. And also, what was the word primary? I'm also a little bit hesitant to say that. I think that an excellent 15-episode miniseries that tells a discrete story will almost always be more effective than the novel of that story, no matter what it is, provided it's done really well, provided the storytelling talent is top-notch. I could come up with a million examples. I'm sure you could too. Like, for instance, the show that began it all. Terrific experience. The show that began it all on TV. This whole model of a whole season to tell a story was a show called Murder One. And it's great. Absolutely great. The whole thing is great. Half of the year was episodic things, but there's a whole storyline. Who killed this one young woman? That storyline arches for the whole story, and we encounter the murder in episode 1, and we encounter the murderer in the very last episode at the end of a TV season. Back when there was no cable, back when you had to tune in, and it was a huge gamble, because episode 8, if you're not on board, you're not going to get on board then. And if you were to watch Murder 1 from beginning to end, which I don't know if it's available, I don't know if it's on any kind of streaming service, but it's great. It's fantastic. And if you were to do that, when you're finished, imagine a novel of the material that you just watched. It would be deadly dull. I might say the same thing about The Sopranos. Unless you had a great writer to do it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is that the creative people in Hollywood who can produce such a thing at such a pitch so that it is fantastic from start to finish, episode by episode, bingeable in an arc, the number of people who have the talent to do that in Hollywood is significantly higher than the number of people who can do that on the written word, on the page. So, I don't know about replacing, but anyway. NASA. Okay, here's NASA's first batch of questions. Hi, Steve. Number 1, how many living people do you know who are as well-read as you are or close to it? It depends on what you mean. I try always not to say it depends in answers to these things, so I know that doesn't please anybody. But there are all kinds of people who are well-read in their subject. Better read than I am in their subject. There are a whole bunch of people like that. There are poetry experts for every century, for every major figure. There are history experts, oh good God, up the wazoo, on every era. But when it comes to books about those things, I mean, there are experts there too. There are people that the New York Review of Books or the New Yorker will go to if they get a book on subject X, Y, or Z. I am a more general interest reader than that. I'm trying not to quote Sherlock Holmes here, that my specialty is omniscience. But when it comes to that, no, I don't know anybody else that does that. Every other really, I won't say serious, because you're all serious readers, but you know what I mean. People who devote their whole lives to it, sort of Olympic caliber readers, people who do nothing else, and who've done nothing else for a long time. Or maybe just professional critics. I know of no one else in that bracket who reads the way I do. I don't know if that makes me well-read or not, but I don't know any other examples like that. Well, we're almost done. Here, let's finish with your questions, and then we'll wrap up. Number 2, thoughts on the recent movie Everything Everywhere All at Once? NASA. Can you guess my thoughts? You've been asking questions. You've been watching my videos for years. We're friends. Can you guess my thoughts on that movie? Instead of asking this question, couldn't you provide the answer, and wouldn't you be right? Let's see here. Number 3, I am on a Chesterton reading spree, currently reading Orthodoxy, and have been enjoying it immensely. Are there any other writers who have this capacity to make people laugh out loud while provoking bouts of thinking at the same time? You mean aside from me? There are. It would depend on what you want to read. Chesterton was a lot like what I just described, omnivorously curious and in large number of subjects, and able to do a massive amount of reading and really good at retaining it. Good at the meta-thinking, where you do the huge amount of reading, the 10 books from the round reading room of the British Museum, and then you take 30,000 feet and think about it in order to make a contribution of your own. Not every writer can do that, and he can, but there are others. There are others who can. Anyway, no, we'll wrap this up, and we'll come on for our part 3.